People spend a lot of time worrying about visas, budgets, and healthcare. But after living here for years, I've become convinced there's something else that can ruin life in Thailand far faster than running out of money. And strangely enough, almost nobody talks about it. I've met retirees who arrived here excited, healthy, optimistic, ready for a new chapter, and 2 years later, they were miserable. Not because Thailand disappointed them, but because of the people they surrounded themselves with. And I've also seen the opposite too. People who arrive here nervous, unsure, wondering if they'd made the right decision, and today they're thriving. Not because they found the perfect condo or the cheapest lifestyle, but because they found the right environment. Sometimes the thing that makes people unhappy in Thailand isn't Thailand at all. It's the company they keep. Now, before anybody misunderstands me, this is not a video about avoiding all expats. Some of my closest friendships here are with other expats, but there are certain social circles that quietly pull people downwards. And if you're not careful, you can drift into them without even realizing it. I call it the Expat Trap. And if you're planning to retire here or already living here, I think this is a conversation worth having. Now, before we talk about the trap itself, I think it's important to be fair. Moving abroad, even when it's exciting, isn't always easy. The honeymoon phase fades and reality arrives. You're figuring things out, the language may feel intimidating, simple things take more effort. And underneath all of that, there can be moments of loneliness that people don't always talk about. So naturally you look for comfort. You hear your own language in a cafe, you meet people who understand your humour and your background, and suddenly Thailand feels a little less overwhelming. And honestly, that's completely normal. But here's where things get interesting. Sometimes that comfort quietly becomes something else. Not overnight, gradually. One familiar cafe, one social group, one routine. And before you realise it, your world becomes smaller instead of larger. This is what I mean by the expat bubble. And I don't say that critically, because bubble feels safe. But safety and growth are not always the same thing. You can move to Thailand physically while emotionally never quite leaving home. Sometimes people recreate the same social world they left behind, just with warmer weather. And this matters more than people realise, because once your social environment becomes small, your thinking can become small too. Not intentionally, gradually. The conversations repeat, the routines repeat, and eventually the people around you begin shaping how you see Thailand itself. That's when the bubble becomes something more than comfort. That's when it starts influencing your happiness. And I think that's where we need to talk honestly about the kinds of social patterns that can quietly pull people in the wrong direction. Now, I want to be careful here. This isn't about judging people. I'm talking about patterns I've watched play out repeatedly, often without people realizing it. Let me share 3 social patterns I've learned to be careful around, because these are the ones that quietly shape how people experience life here. The first one is what I call the professional complainer. You usually meet this person fairly quickly. They've often lived here a long time, and according to them, Thailand is always getting worse. The traffic, the immigration rules, the prices, the weather, the internet, the food, the locals. There is always something wrong. Now let me be fair, some complaints are real. Thailand can be frustrating, but there's a difference between noticing problems and building your identity around them. The professional complainer doesn't just mention frustration. Frustration becomes the atmosphere around them. And here's why that matters. Negativity spreads. Sit around it long enough and your brain adapts to it. You begin scanning for problems. Not because Thailand suddenly changed, but because your attention changed. And eventually, Thailand starts looking exactly the way those conversations described it. And honestly, that can happen to any of us. But if the professional complainer affects how you think, the second type can affect how you live. The Barstool Philosopher. Now, I want to be very careful with this one, because this is not an attack on bars, or alcohol, or enjoying yourself. There's nothing wrong with sitting down with friends and having a drink. That's part of social life. The issue is when the social life becomes the lifestyle. Same place, same bar stool, same people, same conversation, day after day. And I've watched this happen more than once. Someone arrives in Thailand with plans, then gradually, without any dramatic decision, life narrows. The bar becomes the routine, and the routine becomes the identity. There's nothing wrong with a drink, but if your whole world shrinks to one stool and one conversation, that's a different issue. Because what looks like companionship isn't always connection. You're surrounded by people, but are you growing? Are you moving forward? Or simply filling time? And that's the uncomfortable question. The health costs can be real. The financial costs can be real. But sometimes the biggest cost is harder to measure. Years passing, without life becoming any richer than when you arrived. And that's not judgment, that's just something I've seen. Now, the third type is different. I think this one can be the most damaging, the gatekeeper. I actually feel some sympathy for this person, because I don't think the gatekeeper usually starts out bitter. Often they're disappointed or burnt out. Maybe life here didn't unfold the way they hoped, and over time they become cynical. You'll recognize the phrases. Thailand used to be better. Wait until you've been here longer. You're still new. That's not how it works. And underneath those comments is usually the same message. Your excitement is temporary. Your optimism is naive. And eventually, you'll become like me. Now look, I understand where some of this comes from. Places change, people change, life changes. But if you're new here, that mindset can quietly damage something important. Your curiosity. Because new chapters need curiosity. They need room for your own impressions, your own discoveries, your own mistakes. And if every experience gets filtered through someone else's disappointment, you never really get to form your own relationship with Thailand. So protect that. Protect your enthusiasm. You don't have to be naive, but you also don't have to inherit someone else's bitterness. Now, this is the part I think people underestimate, because the cost of the wrong social circle usually doesn't arrive all at once. It's quieter than that, slower, and that's exactly why it matters. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly hate Thailand. It doesn't work like that. What changes first is perspective, and I think this matters. If the conversations around you are constantly negative, if every discussion comes back to what's wrong, what's broken, what's frustrating, your view of the country slowly begins to shift. Not because Thailand changed, but because your attention did. And that happens to all of us. Human beings reflect their environment more than we realize. Think about it. If every day you're hearing, the country isn't what it used to be, eventually your brain starts collecting evidence to support that story. You notice the immigration delay. the pothole, the misunderstanding, the frustration, and quietly, almost without noticing, you stop collecting evidence for the opposite: the smile, the kindness, the peaceful morning, the freedom you came here looking for. And that's a powerful thing, because once perspective changes, experience starts changing too. But there's another cost, and I think this one is more personal. Many people move abroad for more than cheap living. They move for possibility, for change, for adventure. And this is where the wrong crowd can quietly shrink your world. Because if your daily life becomes exactly the same as it was back home, then something important gets lost. The relocation happened, but the transformation didn't. And then there's the third cost. This one's harder to spot: identity shrinkage. Retirement can be one of life's most expansive chapters. More freedom, more choice, but social environments shape us. And if your world keeps getting smaller, if curiosity fades and days become increasingly predictable, something important starts shrinking too. And suddenly, instead of growing into the next chapter, you're managing decline. And I don't say that dramatically, I say it honestly, because I've seen it. If every conversation is about what's wrong with life, eventually you stop noticing what's right. And that's a heavy price to pay, especially in a place that still has so much to offer. Thailand isn't paradise, no country is, but mindset matters, environment matters, and the people around you matter far more than most of us realize. So if that's the problem, what actually works? Because this isn't meant to be a gloomy video about what to avoid. The more useful question is, what kind of life should you be building here? And over time, I've come to a few conclusions. Shared interests matter more than shared passports. This is probably the biggest shift in thinking. When people first arrive, they often look for nationality first. British group, Australian group, American group, and again, I understand why. There's comfort in familiarity. But some of the strongest friendships I've seen in Thailand weren't built around passports at all. They were built around doing something: cycling, golf, photography, fitness, anything that gets you participating instead of just observing. Because when people are doing something together, the conversation changes. You're not just talking about life, you're participating in it. And that's a completely different kind of connection. So here's a simple question worth asking yourself. What brings you alive? Not what fills time. What genuinely interests you? Because Thailand gives people something many of us had too little of back home: time. And time is wasted if we don't use it intentionally. Build a mixed social world. I want to say this carefully. You do not need to become fluent in Thai. You do not need to reinvent yourself. And this isn't about rejecting expat friendships, not at all. But I do think there's some real value in making sure your world doesn't become too narrow. Some of the most grounding experiences I've had here have come through local connections. Sometimes friendships, sometimes simple familiarity. The coffee shop owner who knows your face, the local market, the people you see regularly. Those small connections matter. And if you do build friendships with Thai people or people from entirely different backgrounds, something interesting happens. Your perspective widens. You stop seeing Thailand only through the lens of what it offers foreigners and begin seeing it as a real place, a lived place, a place with its own rhythm and complexity. And honestly, that usually makes the experience richer. Quality matters more than quantity. This one took me a while to understand. Retirement isn't a popularity contest. You don't need 20 friends. You don't need to be part of every gathering. You don't need to know everyone in town. And sometimes, particularly in expat communities, there can be pressure to stay socially busy, to always be out, always connected, always involved. But meaningful connection doesn't work like that. Think about your closest relationships back home. For most people, the list is actually quite short, and that's perfectly fine. 2 or 3 people who genuinely energize you, who are curious, balanced, kind, can make a remarkable difference to your quality of life. Better to have a small circle that lifts you than a large one that drains you. This is something I've gradually developed for myself. I call it the 1 hour rule. If I'm in a social setting and after about an hour the conversation is still circling the same complaints, Thailand is terrible, nothing works, life used to be better, I take that as information, not as a reason to argue, just information. And usually I move on. Because this matters. Your time matters. Your energy matters. And protecting your peace of mind isn't selfish, it's sensible. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is politely leave the table. I've come to believe something quite strongly. Being selective about the people around you isn't unfriendly. It's responsible. Not because people need to be perfect, they don't. We all need somewhere to vent sometimes. But there's a difference between sharing frustrations and building your identity around them. Because you didn't come to Thailand or dream about coming here just to repeat the same emotional patterns in a different climate. You came here looking for something, maybe peace, maybe freedom, maybe simply a better chapter. And if that's true, the people around you matter enormously because your environment becomes your experience. Thailand isn't perfect, no place is, but it can be a remarkable place to live. And part of building a good life here is choosing carefully who helps shape that experience with you. Sometimes that means saying yes to new people, and sometimes quietly it means stepping away from the wrong ones. So I suppose if there's one message in this video, it's this. Be open, be curious, be friendly, but don't be careless with your environment. Because retirement isn't only about where you live, it's also about who you live around. Have you experienced something like the expat bubble, maybe in Thailand or somewhere else? Drop a comment below, I read them all and try and answer them. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.